Welcome back, everybody. And my name's Graham. I'm going to be your host for today's podcast with the two famous, or should I say infamous? I don't know. I'll let you guys tell us any of your stories. I'm here today with James and Nick from Best Path.
Hello.
Hi. How are you guys? Okay.
You're always the host, Graham. Why do you introduce yourself as the host? You're not going anywhere, so it's fine.
I don't know. Well, there might be somebody queuing up who wants to. There might be somebody queuing up who wants to do my job. So we're here on this podcast session today, switching it up with Jimbo and Nick. It's almost February. Where's that bloody month gone?
I know, mate. I know.
Yeah. Has everybody, is all the lights on in the world of IT at the moment?
No, no one can afford them, mate.
Has everybody?
Christmas has just been. Everyone's skinned. It's January. Come on.
Has everybody woken up? Because usually, sometimes you find only those first few weeks of January, everybody's a bit slow to the party.
No, it's been a busy month, hasn't it?
It's been hectic.
I was chatting to a few of our neighbours and stuff in our building and stuff, and they're all busy and stuff. So it's like something switches turned post Christmas. I think people had too much time off. I think maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now they're getting back into things.
Yeah,
so,
that sort of big chunk of time.
Yeah.
Well, we've, from the world of obviously this and marketing and what we do, very much we've sort of seen lots of activity. So let's hope, anybody's listening to this, let's hope we're going to have a really solid year. We hope so. So we had a really heavy conversation during the week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, in relation to today's podcast.
Still digesting it, Graham.
And yeah, I mean, we're going to try and consolidate some of that down into this podcast today for about sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. But we had a really, really big conversation. And today's podcast is entitled The State of the Cloud Nation.
We should have just recorded that call early in the week, shouldn't we? It would have been... I think it was good. It just went off topic and it was just free-flowing.
Absolutely. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And not to go too wide, because we've got lots to talk about, but obviously looking at the stats from the back end of last year in relation to cloud, and I'll just sort of reel a few off here that I've got on my paper. So 70% of organisations report more than half of their infrastructure is in the cloud, and that's growing, so we know that. 44% of organisations adopt the latest cloud products as soon as they're available. That's an interesting stat. Do they not try before they buy?
Yeah, how long for? Got
Yeah,
to question
absolutely.
that one, but yeah,
absolutely.
I'm always clicking the trial button in our stuff.
This is interesting and probably an increasing stat as well. 65% of organisations say their cloud environment is multi-cloud. So I think that's going to come into a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and that's not going anywhere.
No, yeah, and I think a lot of those stats that you mentioned there, Graham, there is a pinch of salt with them in my opinion.
Yeah, it's things like that, like they never show the context behind it. Like, are they intentionally multi-cloud? Probably not. They've probably got two different teams that are doing two different agendas, right?
Exactly,
They don't want to be. It just happens that they are. So I don't know.
But one would say that probably that's a growing trend. Is that something? Let's just debate that for a second. Multi-cloud is going to be
100%.
It's a trend.
Yeah.
Okay. 100%. I think it would be naive not to think it wasn't, right? Because I think providers are very good at sucking you in to their environments. In
get their
certain
claws
ways.
into you.
They get your claw. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. Well, we'll cover it today, right? But there's no one size fits all at the moment. So I think you're playing the field a little bit, like, a bit like a dating thing back when you were a teenager. You play the field a bit, right? Yeah. To get what you want, right? So,
but one would say that's what you need to do anyway. Because I was talking to my son the other day, and of course all the youth they use these dating apps, and I said, well, you can put a specification down of all the things you like, and then there's somebody who's going to come along that's going to like the same things as you. What's wrong with that? I mean, I would actually like to see the divorce rates in, say, 30, 40 years' time. Does that mean that because those specifications are aligned as such, it breeds a better outcome?
Yeah, but what you don't look at, which is another point of our conversation today, is the cost of that, right? That if you're across 4 dating apps, you've got 4 potential targets of women, and the reality, or men, or whatever it is, but you potentially got 4 costs with that, right? So that's the same with multi-cloud, right? Is that you might get better costs.
How does he draw parallels?
Well, you might get better costs being in one place than you would being in 4 different places simultaneously, right? If you've got four partners on the go, you've got 4 meals each week to buy, right? Whereas it's no different than the cloud. If you've got 4 different instances, you've got different costs, different variations. You can't track the spending effectively.
All I'm thinking is Mrs. Doubtfire You know, the restaurant scene.
yeah.
And he's taking like the wig off and spraying some perfume, getting lipstick
His
on.
teeth end up in the whiskey.
Yeah, a few wines down. Like,
So there's a lot of activity going on in this sector right now. So we've got all the big players. We've got AWS, we've got Microsoft, we've got Google Cloud. I was looking at the stats actually. The biggest company that's shown the gain at the moment in activity is Microsoft, funny enough.
Yeah.
I know we're just going to come on and talk about Google, because
Yeah.
Google have been doing some interesting things. So,
but Microsoft have a good trigger to get you in. It's all the Office 365.
Yeah, absolutely.
So most businesses stay Microsoft orientated, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an easy transition from Office 365 into Azure services, because you're already using it once you sign up. So the transition, I think, for a lot of organisations into Azure is quite natural, quite what's the word, sort of organic, because it's part and parcel of what you sign up to get your emails, to get your Teams, to get your video calling and stuff. Whereas AWS and Google, Google probably do offer it, but it's a very different what's the word, sort of strategy and behaviour and sort of suite of products, isn't it? Like so I think the likes of Google and Microsoft have a good sort of inroad to get you there, which is why I think multi-cloud's about, right? Because a lot of people started off going to AWS when it's first around, and then Office 365 came along, and there was a natural evolution into Azure cloud and stuff, right? So. And we see people transitioning.
I was going to say that. It was exactly what I was going to say. This has come kind of a bit left field, really. But we see this from a different perspective. Just to go on what you're saying about stepping stone on Azure. When we've been looking at kind of hiring for kind of Azure engineers, they're all ex kind of desktop and server engineers, the people that have been kind of managing AD and that kind of stuff, rather than not understand kind of cloud native services and so on. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm Azure engineer," and then you look at them and it's like, well, you're not. You're just a kind of, I don't know, more of a server focus and a server administration focus, because all of those services have naturally moved to the cloud.
Correct.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of example of the same thing that you're saying, I think.
I mean, when I was looking at the shift, sort of just the market shifts, I think Microsoft had the biggest gain last year. I think it was just under 10% growth. Now you look at everybody else and it's much of a muchness. You've got some underliers coming in that are at the bottom end of that. So Alibaba, you look at IBM, so they're much lower on the ground, but they're starting to come into the market. Now, particularly, I think we wanted to talk today just about some of the things that Google are doing. Google Cloud. Because I get the sense when I've done some research in this, I think this market is going to start shaking. It's going to be a little bit more competition. And those top providers, maybe they are going to have some issues in relation to the freshness of how Google is sort of looking at the marketplace. So why don't you just share what you're seeing and in relation to them, and what's your views and thoughts about it?
I think competition is going to be key. I think you're right in terms of the state of it. The competition's is hotting up, I suppose, because AWS and Azure are pretty much, from my view, have got the market share, right? And when we start talking about public cloud services and stuff, but Google have been making a big play for that for the last few years. And
everyone's trying to add features, right? And suck people in and say, "Oh, they can do this shiny thing."
But I suppose what you're talking about there is the conversations with the competition laws and stuff like that, and how people are actually paying twice for their data, right? Once to earn it and once to get it back as well, right? So I think that is quite an important thing, and Google have announced that they're gonna remove those exit fees if you go into another or egress fees. Yeah, correct. So I suppose that's an interesting point, because that certainly puts them on the roadmap. Because I suppose when we talk to people about cloud, or not just cloud, any product, you've got to have an exit strategy these days. I think, because you don't know what the longevity of organisations are, you don't know what the longevity of those solutions are. So knowing what an exit strategy might look like from day one, I think is on a lot of CEOs, CTOs' radar, and I think this might start to play into that, right? And it comes back to the cloud providers that you mentioned there, Alibaba, IBM, Oracle. There are so many cloud providers in the industry today, and there's more coming along, right? Businesses now are starting to fire up their own like cloud offerings and stuff like that because they see cloud as being the way to go. But all they're doing is they're just putting themselves in competition. So we're now starting to see that different organisations have to do something different to differentiate themselves from their other players, and Google's play I think is quite nice, I suppose, from that perspective.
They're trying to de-risk the adoption, right? They're trying to say, look, we've got nothing to hide. If you want to step away at any one point, then feel free.
But it also puts them in a niche position compared to Azure and AWS, right? Because they're saying, oh, we will.
They'll follow, mate. They'll follow.
They're going to have to.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's going to be my next question because they're going to because of. I think what Google do is like a change in mindset. They're almost like resetting the mindset to say, actually, we've got to have that flexibility to be able to move around this environment. Now,
it's not. I don't think it's mindset. I think it's purely revenue, right? You've got to do something different to your competitors to stay relevant and increase your bottom line.
I mean,
right?
Google are walking away from millions of pounds worth of business by actually saying, right, we're not going to charge you now for transferring your data.
The details around it, I had a look at the details, and it's sketchy.
It's sketchy.
It was like, well,
It's made the front page of the news, though, almost, doesn't it?
It was
as
like,
an L world.
We'll charge you no fees if you terminate all your cloud agreements, and you have to do it move all your data out within 60 days. No one's ever going to exit public cloud within 60 days.
Well, yeah, but it depends on what you want, right? But no one's going to do it because we were talking before this about Elon Musk, right? And going in and just turning shit off, right? The reality is that no one does it because at the minute it's far too expensive to exit the cloud and get your data out, right? So the reality, because I was reading an article and it was saying that on like for large organisations on average it would cost them something like $500,000 if they wanted to leave their cloud provider just to get their data out. That's a phenomenal amount of money that no one tracks, right? No one's putting a nest egg away to go, well, if this shit goes down the pan, like.
Yeah, and are the fees relevant to do so? I mean,
exactly.
We spoke. Didn't
it's your data. Why should you have to pay for your own shit, right?
He said something like, I think out of like everyone's cloud bill, egress fees make up on average 7% of their total bill.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
That's a lot, isn't it? Like when you think about it, like that's just your data, right? That's your data that you're having to pay once to put it there, or like to glean it and earn it, and then you've got to pay to get it back out. Like people are fickle, I suppose, and it works while it works. But as soon as companies have got everything in the cloud, and they're starting to look at cost savings, well then what's the first thing they're going to look at? Well, what's the biggest chunk of cash, right?
We've talked about this for ages, like a number of times. Like people don't track this stuff cleanly.
Yeah,
I know you get this new kind of jobs for kind of people to work specifically in tracking the financial efficiencies of cloud compute and that kind of stuff. But not many people do it well. People just kind of go, it's cloud, just pay the bill and let's move on.
Yeah, until they dump an intensive app in the cloud and then they go, my bill's just gone up by 10% from that one app, and then people start asking questions and going, well, why are we spending so much? Oh, well, that's because we've got the database in this place, and actually we're pulling all the data from it back on prem every day, like, and it's costing us $70,000 a month, and it's like, well, let's get it on prem because I can do it on prem for far less, right? So I
don't want to sound cloud bashing at all because it's definitely the right it's the right thing to do.
But it's a changing landscape as such. We spoke, didn't we, this week about. To use an analogy, the garden walls are coming down.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's going to move more into sort of an open environment where things are going to be easier to move around. I mean, that's going to cause some issues, obviously.
Yeah. Well,
do you think that's going to be a sort of a growing trend?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, elasticity is key, right? And when you say about bringing down the walls, that elasticity piece across the multi-cloud domain, I think is paramount, right? I suppose if we look at on-prem, right, Nick, you'll back me up here. If we look at on-prem, they're still trying to pull down those walls today, right, in some organisations in terms of different people doing different things. But I suppose at the minute, on-prem, the network brings it all together, right? So that those walls, those barriers between organisations, B2B, businesses, VPNs and stuff, that those walls are already down. We have a mechanism for doing that. But at the minute, the cloud's quite rigid in that respect.
They're going to have to stay competitive, right? They're going to have to open themselves up a little bit. You can look, now you can directly interconnect GCP instances through to AWS and stuff. They know that people need easier ways of interconnecting with different cloud providers, right? So there's a number of different kind of strategies and considerations around it, but the people or providers are going to have to make themselves a bit more open to make it easier for people, I think, so that they can stay relevant.
Well, they've got to become more ISP-like, right? It's no different to all the internet service providers out there. They're having to work together to deliver on the internet backbone, right? So you've got your L3s, you've got your global crossings of the past and stuff that are all like there, all providing the backbone for the internet, but they're having to work with different providers to actually bring the edge services together. And I see that this is where the cloud is going to have to go. And Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're all going to have to start getting together and thinking about this, because at the minute the customer's carrying the burden for that inter-cloud connectivity.
Well, that's where all of these other kind of multi-cloud networking tools, they're loving it, right? They've got a whole kind of sub-industry that is being facilitated by kind of cloud providers, not natively integrating.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's no different to like the MPLS when MPLS came about, right? Is that you think about how people were doing things before MPLS came around. MPLS was a nice overlay that gave you that consistency or that commonality to be able to interoperate from one end to the other. And I don't think cloud providers are quite there yet. So cloud providers, I think, and they're having to do more to meet customer demand, because as more customers come online, I think what the cloud providers are starting to see, just based on trends and stuff of features that are being overlaid into the cloud, which if we'd spoken about that 5 years ago, they wouldn't have even been considered, right? So I think as more customers go in, the cloud providers are going to see more need to maybe just mould themselves a bit more around the customer demand, right?
I can't remember which report it was that we were talking about the other day, and it said something like 80. There was a survey, and it was something like, out of everyone that surveyed, 80% of the customers that have a multi-cloud strategy, 80% said that they struggle managing the networking between all the different places they need to interconnect.
Complexities.
The networking complexity, 80%.
Yeah,
the other 20% are obviously liars.
Or they're not in the cloud yet. Like a friend of ours that was talking to the other day.
So what was he said? He said it's not most. The guy
They're waiting for it to mature.
No, he said they haven't migrated to the cloud yet, but they've already started repatriating.
So when you talk about that, is the subject of sort of access controls. I mean, is that going to become a massive subject?
Oh, huge.
Right?
Huge.
Yeah, 100%. Interconnecting's one thing, right?
Yep.
Putting security controls and mechanisms between them is another like ball game in itself, because I think at the minute every cloud provider does something different. The principles are the same, but they all use a different methodology to achieve it. And I think this is where we work with lots of different businesses. Some that are starting to go, well, you know what, actually we need to put like a vendor firewall up there so that we can control security the way we've historically done. And others at the minute are still not there. So once they start bringing this stuff together, and at the minute their saving grace is that because you as the customer are having to provide that interconnectivity between the cloud, you're getting some controls over that. But once you move that out of your control, or who's managing it, when you've got, in some instances, two different cloud teams, one running Azure, one running AWS or GCP, how do they talk? Because they can't have a common playing field if you've got so many different people all vying for the same mechanisms, right?
So is there going to be, like, look at this, is this like a VHS Betamax? Will one solution prevail? Does it have to?
Yeah.
Does
digital streaming?
Does the industry have to adapt or adopt something that has commonality in it, which allows that easy access control across those different providers?
No,
or is it always going to be bespoke?
I see as people using different providers for different functions, different specialist functions, but still needing an interdependency, some way to interconnect them. That's how I see it.
But I also see this as bringing complexity, right? Because at the minute, the cloud providers all do their thing in their own bubble, and they don't really have to integrate with other systems and platforms, right? But whereas if we look at the evolution of on-premise architectures, vendors, solutions and stuff, they've had to grow and build into the wider ecosystem. Like a good example of that, TACAX, right? Vendors, whether you're Arista, whether you're Cisco, whether you're Fortinet, whether you're Palo Alto, they've had to integrate with a TACAX solution. And TACAX, my traditional one is ICE, right? In terms of Cisco ICE, that's what people are using for service group mappings or TACAX authentication. But all the vendors have had to adopt that protocol and that mechanism to be able to authenticate in the same way. And I think this is what the cloud providers haven't quite grasped yet. And I think this is what's coming on their roadmap, because I think it was the same article as that in the cloud connectivity from GCP. They're looking at putting IPsec up there. They're looking at putting bidirectional forwarding, BFD detection and stuff. Like, once you start putting those things in there, well, actually, you've got to bring the network guys along on a journey, and the security guys, because we're starting to put mechanisms and controls there that have historically always been on-prem.
Or hidden away in the cloud.
Cloud, or not even available in the cloud, right? So when these products and services start to become available, well, not everyone understands this, right? This is what the network team and the security teams have been doing for the last 20, 50 years, right? So why would you not bring them along on the journey? Because I think we see a lot of companies not bringing their infrastructure teams along on the journey with the cloud adoption, right?
Would you say that company processes and procedures of companies have matured sufficiently for kind of cloud adoption?
No.
If that makes sense. They're still kind of lagging behind, right? Even if kind of companies have processes and procedures on-prem, for some reason they don't always seem to apply when that same customer is in public cloud.
Yeah, because it's a walled garden, as you quite rightly said. Because it's a walled garden, everyone does it in their own little bubble. So everyone thinks it's constrained. Everyone thinks it's contained away. So they haven't had the mechanisms or the need to drive that policy. But once we start pushing this across multiple clouds and all the cloud providers start interoperating, well, that's when you start getting outages, because now you've got potentially 2 teams, 3 teams going across different cloud providers and doing different things, different security controls, different interconnects and stuff like that, different routing policies. The cloud teams, some can do it, some can't, right? Because some of them, as you quite rightly said, come from a server-ish background or application background and don't have a historical knowledge of networking. And some networking or server guys go in and don't have a historical knowledge of application teams. And I think this is where, when we went to the Gartner session, that they were talking about that platform-independent layer.
The platform engineering.
Yeah, the platform engineering layer, where different teams will come together to try and create an architecture.
It's going to be my next question.
But no one does that. No one does that currently, right? You look at most customers, most organisations. That's the case, right? They've still got silos. No one talks.
Yeah.
Everyone's got different stickers on the laptops, if you know what I mean. But no one has a cross-functional team, which is what's needed.
Well, it's interesting. We touched on, didn't we, on Elon earlier, and I've been listening to his book over the last few weeks. And one of the things he's done with Tesla and SpaceX, he's put the designers of the components together, and then the manufacturer of those components together, and then he's put those teams right next to the production line. So everybody's, I've got to fit this bit onto here. But it's not working. And so you've got everybody in the one place. So you haven't got these siloed departments that aren't talking to each other. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Do you think there's going to be a rise for that sort of demand?
Definitely.
I don't know whether it's a process, whether it's a procedure.
It's a changing culture. It's a changing
culture. It's culture, I think.
So what's pushing back on that? People just are reticent from wanting to be part of that total community because they don't see the relevance of it. Is that what it is?
I think some of it's fear, some of it's knowledge, some of it's skills. Like I think if we look at some infrastructure teams, security teams generally get left behind in decision making choices. Do you not think?
They do, yeah. Then cock block everything.
But that's only because they're being left behind, right? If you bring people on a journey, they're less likely to cock block you and fucking.
But I've never heard that term.
But that's no different. Like if you're going to have a business decision, right? You get all the stakeholders on board early, so that someone's not going to put their hand up at the last minute and say they've not been involved. And
I think
block
security is going to grow in the cloud. I think security needs to grow in the cloud because I think from what we see, we always tell our customers, look, get security on board, whether that's an on-prem thing, whether that's a cloud thing, you have to have security's buy-in. If you don't,
well, it's impossible to retrofit stuff.
It's impossible to retrofit stuff, right? Okay. And you end up just doing what you've always done and it not being efficient, I suppose.
So is there a demand? So we've spoken about, I think we spoke about this last year, almost like scenario mapping, playing out what the environment idealistically should look like, and then absolutely saying, right, okay, if that's utopia, if that's what we're aiming for, what do we have to do to make that happen? And I guess so it goes back to what we said: get everybody in the room. This is the defined objective, outcome, what we're trying to achieve. Right, whose responsibility is it about all of those things? Let's get everybody in the room. Let's plan it out. I mean, do you see that as what you do? Where do you play a role in that functionality?
Well, it's design, right? If you've got a good modular and elastic design, then onboarding additional things and new features, and you mentioned earlier on about the number of new features that are coming on, 40%, I think you said. And the reality is that to onboard those features, you want to be able to do that without breaking the rest of the shit you got running,
Absolutely.
right? And I think that's where a good design, a good strategy, a good architecture and understanding between teams is important, because if you don't, the more you add, the more you stretch the boundaries of what the art of the possible is, and the confidence in your backbone or your infrastructure teams to keep it alive and keep it online, right? So I think for me that's probably important. Just having a good design and a good strategy, because if you don't, it's I suppose a bit like Jenga, isn't it? The more blocks you keep pulling out or adding to it, the more likely you are to topple, right?
Well, you have that great. I saw your presentation this week. And you've got that great animation or graphic that moves.
Oh, the Rubik's cube.
It shows the elasticity of the sort of network, and then all of a sudden it breaks and it all falls over. And things like that. But there must be things outside of the control of that. So one of the subjects we spoke about this week was about latency, bandwidth, and that when you're planning all of that, that's something that's sometimes out of your control.
It isn't. But this is where a good design comes into play, right? Because it shouldn't be out of your control, because your design should be scalable to meet that demand. And this is where the cloud providers do it very well within their own bubble, but this is where they're going to be challenged when they start to bring or start to need to integrate with the other cloud providers, because they're no longer in control of that modularity. There's two sides of that conversation, right? And this is no different to when we're on prem, right? There's always two sides of a conversation, and that's as soon as you start getting that's where the flexibility and the scalability start to diminish in terms of return of investment.
There's two elements to this as well, right? There's one that excuse me, one's the kind of the design in terms of getting it right early on, but then the second part, which a lot of people don't always consider or follow through on, is the kind of the ongoing monitoring of it. You got the design, you got these requirements. How do you know if you're adhering to it? How do you know if you're you're near your capacity? No, not a lot of people do that well, and it's harder to do in a multi-cloud environment.
Sure.
When you've got 2, 3, 4 different cloud providers, a couple of DCs around the world, an application that spans everywhere. People lose track of that.
Yeah, but it's not just losing track of that. It's that I think also a lot of organisations don't DR test enough. Right? They put stuff in and they run it for a year or two, and then when something breaks, they go, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen." It's like, but when was the last time you did a DR test? Oh, we did it when we put it in. And it's like, well, yeah, but as soon as you put it in, it's already out of date, because you've loaded X, Y, Z on top of it, and now you've got a different behaviour, a different outcome, a different scenario to plan against. So I don't think businesses are very good on the housekeeping thing, which we covered in our trends, right? In terms of that. So I think that's kind of stuff where I think businesses probably need to evolve slightly more, because the more you diminish or relinquish your ownership of stuff to cloud providers, technically the less control you have over the outage scenarios with that, and I think being aware of that, and even that might even mean turning off the cloud in its entirety and making sure that your multi-cloud domain still functions, right? What does that look like? Because you could have 3 different cloud providers, but if it's all hosted on Azure AD and Azure AD goes offline for any, well, what does that mean for applications, right? What's your backup? What's your contingency? And I think this is where businesses probably haven't thought a lot about the cloud and stuff. I know years ago, wasn't it? We went to AWS Summit, wasn't it? I was talking about the chaos engineering for Netflix and stuff like that, and I think that's really, really interesting. Like, they just had a thing where they were turning stuff off and proving that it worked, and that the redundancy worked and stuff. So I think it's,
and finding out if it doesn't.
Yeah, and finding out if it doesn't, and if it doesn't, why doesn't it? Fix it, and that sort of thing. So I think that more proactive approach is paramount. The more you relinquish away from your on-premise, the more you have to be, I think, in touch with these DR scenarios.
You see all those new certifications that Cisco come out with? Multi-cloud networking certifications.
Yeah.
You know, there's Cisco making a load of acquisitions in that space as well when it comes around to, you know, like multi-cloud adoption and monitoring and observability in the cloud and stuff.
Yeah.
They've, you know, a number of key acquisitions recently. So it's not. I'm not saying it's 100% a trend, but saying to say it's trend makes probably kind of undermines it a little bit. 100% is the future, and I think it's only just probably now starting to filter down to kind of, you know, the most engineers. Right? You think about how many kind of people do you know that really understand kind of multi-cloud networking? It's not a lot.
It's not a lot. It's not a lot. And this is what I said. This is what we said during our trends, right? Is that at some point there needs to be an overlay of some sort, or the cloud providers need to become more ISP-like and give an overlay between different clouds to allow people to come on that journey, because effectively I see them becoming more ISP-like in terms of their functionality, in terms of their offerings. Actually, you're going to them for a service and you turn that service on and you integrate it with the rest of your network the way you would if it was a branch office or an ISP linked between your offices, right?
So I guess, you know, we've spoken about this before, and okay, so we're looking at this multi-cloud. Obviously, we've got to start looking at the elephant in the room, which is the volume of data and the volume of things that are shifting around this whole environment.
Yeah.
And I know this week we spoke about low code, we spoke about SaaS, we spoke about text being just image files now, and things like that, and the movement of that. Do you think that's going to accelerate massively as well in the market in relation to the volume of data and having the ability to move that across networks very easily?
Yeah, I agree. And again, this is where egress fees are likely to impact on that and probably increase costs quite massively, especially when you talk about things like AI and stuff like that.
So we've got like 40 minutes in and no one's even mentioned AI.
Can we do a podcast ever where we don't mention AI?
But it's true, right? They're very data heavy. They're very big on the data, right? So it's like the reality is that they need to
It's a big consideration.
It's a big consideration.
It's a huge consideration.
I think this play from Google may help drive
that's going to help.
Right?
You've seen that data centre they're building. They're building a brand new data centre in Waltham Cross. It's not too far from our neck of the woods, but it's like £1 billion data centre. Yeah, literally from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that's just that's just got to be. You know, it'll probably be used. When are they saying that's going to be at its peak? Any idea? Have you seen any stats on it?
I remember reading it. I don't remember.
I can't remember seeing the dates.
It's privately funded, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely massive, phenomenal size.
I know they were talking about sustainability with it and stuff like that, which I suppose I have to be talking about today.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the consumption of energy, and as we've rightfully said about AI and the amount of computations that's gonna mean that the world is going to be doing.
Yeah.
Increasingly, we're only just at the beginning of this. For God's
sake.
Yeah. We promise not to try and talk about AI next week. next time we're out. So let's try and do a bit of a wrap up, shall we? So, what are the key sort of takeaways we're talking about here? Obviously, planning, design,
absolutely fundamental. Right? We do see a trend where people everyone knows that kind of cloud adoption has been not always strategic. You know, you've got teams that go off and do some cloud stuff, another different team that go off and do some other cloud stuff, and the design will come a couple of years down the line when someone realises that stuff doesn't work as expected. So the strategy and the design early on is paramount.
Yeah, and I guess what we've been saying is, get those teams in the room,
Get them
drive
talking.
Yeah. But it's also what we don't know, right? We there's still lots of things that we don't know, right? Is that we've sat there and spoken about the cloud providers and integrating them and being more ISP like, but there's so many other components that businesses use that aren't factored into this right today. So you've got the SaaS platforms, you've got the smaller cloud providers like your hosting companies and stuff like that. They're not integrated, right? And I think this is where like we've got to start seeing that sort of come together. And again, it comes back to whether that's an overlay, whether that's something.
Using the overlay and make it someone else's problem.
Make it someone else's problem, yeah.
Do you reckon in 100 years' time or 150 years' time, someone will be going back in archives and looking at our conversation? Look what they were talking about. They didn't have a clue.
This video editing will be sit on an EC2 instance somewhere for another 50 years where we'll be broke.
They're not going to be able to download it from Google because they have to pay the fees.
What have we found in the archives? It's like one of those sort of Mr. Chumley Warmer moments. Look how they used to talk about IT.
No, but it's fair. Like 10 years ago, public cloud didn't really exist for a lot of businesses, or for most people, right? So we don't know what the future holds. I don't think, and I think it's a here and now sort of understanding of the landscape. I think I wouldn't like to think that what we've just sat here and discussed is something that will be recognised in 5 years' time, because at the minute technology is moving massively quickly, right? So.
Yeah, you're a legend in your own lunchtime, Jimbo. Well, guys, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you. And believe you me, I think we probably could have sat here for the next 2 hours and sort of chewed through on this. Jimbo, you're off to Cisco Live.
Yes.
So part of what we're going to be doing on our next podcasts is we're going to be talking about some of the outcomes, some of the things you've seen, some of the general trends. And obviously Cisco, we've mentioned that about some of the new products they've got coming out. So I think it would be really good to try and overlay that.
Yeah.
What do they bring to the market and what can we talk about in that environment?
Yeah.
And it'd be good to sort of chew that through.
Yeah, sounds good.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
I'll be sat here with my
Skis on.
goggle marks and
a
panda face.
You're doing a VR. It's your virtual reality. Yeah.
No, I was hoping to get Cisco Live, but it's not worked out from a scheduling perspective this year. I'll be
Somebody's got to run the company.
Skiing instead.
Oh, I thought you said you're going to be shackled to the desk.
No.
Oh, mate, you just told the world you're on holiday.
not an issue. You've got to have a holiday. I need a holiday.
If he leaves his laptop at home, it's a holiday. Anyway, thanks, guys. It's been great, and see you next time.
Cheers, Graham. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.